Second part. As Meg stared down into it in disbelief, from beside her D'Argent asked, "So, it was a trap after all?" "It sure was. Just look. The bottom of the pit has a bunch of stakes pointing up. We were going to be impaled on 'em." And then she remembered something. Scanning their surroundings, she called out at the absolute minimum volume, "Lord Denai, are you okay?" There was no reply. "He was shot, but it'd take more than that to kill a noble. I wonder if he's lying low," said D'Argent. "I don't know, but if that thingy is out of commission." Meg tried to envision their next move, but it didn't go very well. Under the present circumstances, an immortal without the use of either arm was about as useful as breasts on a bull. Maybe I should just leave him behind. That upstart of an idea skimmed through her head, but was swiftly forgotten. Out in stormy weather, she'd let their catch flap back into the sea because she wasn't paying attention. "It's not my fault," was how the train of thought had started, and it had gotten all the way to, "I never even wanted this job in the first place," when the fist struck her. Meg's father grabbed her and shook her bodily, saying, "Love it or hate it, if you're on the job, you gotta take responsibility for it. The world'll be more than happy to pile responsibilities on top of the ones you deserve. When it does, don't you dare run from 'em, not even if it kills you. When you feel like calling it quits, that's when you've really gotta bite your tongue." That was the first time her father had ever looked that scary to her, and the last. "At any rate, we should hide," D'Argent said, and he too scanned in all directions. "If push comes to shove, don't you worry about me. Take off on your own." "Well, what do you know? He's braver than I thought," Meg mused. "Because I'll do the same," the former teacher added. "So, you ditch your responsibilities, eh?" "Okay, I see," the girl replied, and then she heard the sound of something treading grass behind them. "Over there." Meg dashed over to a gigantic tree, and she and D'Argent took cover behind a trunk that looked twice as large as they could get their arms around. There hadn't been any road there to begin with. Anybody who'd walked through a world so choked with trees couldn't be considered normal. The girl was poised with her harpoon. The footsteps were coming up from ahead and off to the right, and seemed to run along a stand of trees. "Sst," D'Argent said, gesturing to the weapon on his right arm. "Use this. Laser harpoon won't do you any good." "Who asked you? I've had nothing but harpoons to get me this far." "You were just lucky. Screw you." She snapped at him. But just then a figure she recognized pushed his way out of the high grass. "You?" The hirsute giant had no trouble catching Meg's voice. "Who's out there?" he said, drawing the longsword from his back. The rasp of it leaving a sheath, almost 10 feet long, made D'Argent tremble. He'd started out as a teacher. He probably wasn't used to the field of battle, and now that he'd lost the use of both hands, he'd probably be afraid of his own shadow. The giant bellowed, "Come on out. Garagon's the name. I'm a hunter. I came here to hunt the island's nobility, so forget all that running and hiding and come right on out." "Some acquaintance of yours?" D'Argent inquired. Meg nodded. In a sense, she was running into a member of her party again. She wanted to jump right out of hiding. However, something held her back. "Oh, not coming out, are you?" If you're milling about with the sun still bright, that means you ain't a noble. And what are you? Some reject who only got half drained? Not that it matters. I'm gonna flush you out right quick. The giant thrust his longsword out in front with both hands and held it level to the ground. The instant the swordsman's eyes closed, Meg felt a powerful shudder go through D'Argent's body. She herself had twitched. The longsword stretched. Or rather, it beamed the same width as the weapon shot from its tip. On coming into contact with a stand of trees, it tore through them like they were paper, and then zipped off into the far reaches of the woods. Get out here. The giant spun. The beam of light filled the pair's field of view. Maggie quickly ducked down, and now the air above her head wavered. Instinctively she shouted, "Run for it!" Beside her, the trunk of the gigantic tree they'd been hiding behind fell, shaking the earth in the process. The cut end was facing her, and it was so smooth. It left Meg amazed. She thought it'd been a heat beam, but there were no signs of charring. Meg decided it had to be the work of a kind of energy beyond her imagining. "It's willpower, you know," D'Argent said from right behind her. He hadn't been kidding about being a teacher. Though the human will is colorless and shapeless, there are times when it takes one form or another, which is what that light is. As the mystery was explained away, a voice befitting that gargantuan form called down from overhead, "Why, if it ain't Meg! Never would have expected to run into you out here." "How sweet of you to remember me," Meg said, running her eyes across their surroundings as she got to her feet. Suddenly, a vast clearing seemed to have come into being. All the way into the distance, trees had been mowed down at the same height, with toppled trunks, branches, and leaves stretching on and on in a new land. No one would have believed all that had been accomplished by one man with a single swing of his longsword. "You bet your butt I did," the giant replied with a belly laugh. "Back in the tunnel, I got separated from the others. Hell, I didn't even think you'd make it out okay. So who's this with you?" "A survivor from the group of settlers. Seems everybody else was killed." "Well, that's great," the giant said, his eyes gleaming. "I haven't run into anybody yet. So tell me all about these nobles." "I'm D'Argent. I was a teacher." "A teacher? You don't say," Gargon remarked, his smile becoming a mocking sneer. Teachers would be the eternal bane of ruffians like him. "Know what became of the other bounty hunters?" Meg inquired, in an effort to dispel the awkward atmosphere. Immediately shaking his head, the giant replied that he didn't. "The sheriff's boy. His name was Wesley or something like that, right? He's dead." Meg was at a loss for words. "He took Lancer's spear in the belly and was dying. With a wound like that, he was a goner. And you didn't try to save him or anything?" Meg asked as she tried to choke down something hot rising within her. "Give me a break. I had these freaks on my tail, you know. Didn't have time to dig around with that." Meg nodded twice. With the first, she recalled the young lawman's smiling face. And with the second, it disappeared. He'd been swallowed up by rough seas, and that was what Dad had taught her to do when somebody died. So, you headed anywhere in particular? Like the nobles' home? We were doing fine until a little while ago, Meg replied. The girls searched for the vehicle, but couldn't find it anywhere. But even if they had it, without Lord Denai along, they wouldn't know where to go. Things can never be easy, can they? The girl groaned, but just then an unsettling laugh from nowhere in particular reached her ears. It's close, Gargon said, training his eye on the sky, and turning to the left. That was the direction he'd come from. The trio's eyes focused on the figure that appeared from the bushes. A noble, Gargon groaned. One look at the azure cape, and clothing that called to mind the sea, and a mask studded with jewels, and anyone would have come to the same conclusion. No, scratch that. The giant continued. It's still daytime. They have items that let them walk around by day, Meg said, countering Gargon's assessment. You don't say. So, it's the real thing then? Gargon asked, his long sword still unsheathed. That suits me just fine. I bet you thought rescuing the villagers was a job for the lawman, and the rest of us were just along as bodyguards. Now, to get down to work. You two hit the dirt. As he said that, the great blade flashed out, howling through the wind, and the masked noble was visibly shaken as he made a great leap back. When he landed some 15 feet away, Gargon already had the tip of his sword aimed straight at the noble's heart. The giant's lips twisted into a smile. That smile was rooted in his overwhelming self-confidence. Would he call upon that same technique again? Down, Meg shouted at Dargent, lying flat on the ground. An endless sword fight of light flashed over their heads. The gleaming willpower split the masked nobleman's head from his torso, and then returned to being a normal blade. Gargon's eyes bugged. The noble's head hadn't fallen off, and he saw his foe's hand going for the sword on his hip. He snarled in anger, flashing it again with the blade of light. Though split in two from head to crotch, the noble bounded, his sword in turn cutting the giant in two, from the head down to the lungs. An enormous quantity of fresh blood became a red wind whisking through the world, and staining everything the same hue. As Gargon dropped limply to his knees, Meg could only stare at him with desperation in her eyes. How could a giant of a man with such a tremendous ability be cut down so easily? Heaven and earth alike rocked violently, and Meg dropped to one knee on the spot and tried to steady herself. In her ear, she heard Gargon say, I think that's about enough fun and games. Her surprise was so great, she immediately returned to her senses. Gargon turned his face to her and smiled. His head wound was swiftly closing. You see now, I've long since been bit. Now I'm a faithful bodyguard to the nobility. Second part end.